finally. Passover's finally here. It's really late this year, but it's we're definitely in the countdown for Passover, and yeah, it's gonna it's gonna be a busy week. I think we've got more people signed up for our Seder than we did even last year, which is
Wow.
I mean,
That's because Mary and I are coming.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's not like it's not like it's ridiculously more. It's probably it's gonna be like 10, about 10, 15 more at the community Seder. But it's nice. And there's definitely some people who have not been to things in our community before. So I'm hoping we're gonna be able to bring some more people in.
Good.
I wrote an article for the Signal, which will appear this weekend, about Passover and about, if you can imagine, I wrote a little bit about what's going on this year in the
Excellent.
Jewish community for Passover, where we're definitely thinking about what's going on in Israel and the fact that there literally are people in captivity this Passover. Our people are actually being held in bondage.
Yes.
So it's a tough one. And so I wrote a little bit about that. So you'll see that this weekend. And
Is there any general knowledge about the fact that hostages couldn't be exchanged because it's possible they've been eliminated?
well, yeah, that's the fear. The fear is that
Yeah.
there aren't enough hostages to make there might be some, but there's not enough to make a reasonable type of exchange, meaning that there's maybe less than 10 or whatever. And of
Wow.
course, if there's less than that, then how are they going to exchange, 900? I mean, they will. Israel might even, in a certain circumstance, exchange, hundreds and hundreds of people. They've done that before. They exchanged 1,000 people for over 1,000 terrorists for Gilad Shalit when he was held in
Mhm.
Gaza. So it's very possible that they would do something similar. But yeah, people don't know how many people are still alive. But even if it's one person, we have to hope and pray that they'll be released and that the families at least will have the peace that the people they love are beyond suffering and are beyond what must have been a horrible nightmare
Mhm.
being there. So I'm hoping that those families will be able to be at peace in the coming days, God willing, tomorrow, but doesn't appear that way. And so, I have the
Yeah.
numbers for another day, and people, of course, are asking me about it today. And almost every day, somebody says something to me. Why do you have that number on you? And again, I think today, no one's ever said anything negative
I'm
yet.
glad to hear that.
No
But
one said anything
they
negative.
don't seem to realize how bad Hamas is in spite of everything we have found out. And that's what bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely thinking about that now as we gear up for Passover, and beyond that, Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is in a few weeks. And after that, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day, which I can only imagine what is going to go on in Israel for Yom
Wow.
Ha'atzmaut. But that'll be literally 4 weeks from today, or 4 weeks from yesterday, will be Yom Ha'atzmaut. So that is that's the next few weeks are going to be busy and also pretty emotional. And let's hope there's going to be a little bit more peace over this next period of time. We've got a lot of people that have joined us already. We've got a minion already joining us online.
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, you're here. And then we've
I'm
got,
sorry. I'm still dealing with this leak. I got to deal with it.
well,
Is my wife there?
your wife is here. Yes,
You mean your better half?
we're taking good care of her, and she's taking good care of us, actually, I should say. But yeah, I'm going to We're on Zoom. I mean, we're on Facebook. We're on Zoom, of course. We're also on Facebook, and we're finishing up today. We have one text. We could have finished last week, but there was an issue with finishing Pirke Avot last week, which is that even though we got to the end, first of all, there was a lot of people, not a lot, but there were a few of you that were not here. We definitely wanted to finish Pirke Avot and wrap this all up together. So we had a few people missing. But also, as we're wrapping up Pirke Avot, which I mentioned last week is ironic, the timing, because normally after Passover, we spend the next 6 weeks between the 6 weekends between Passover and Shavuot, we spend studying Pirke Avot, one chapter per week. And we had mentioned that this chapter 6, was actually added specifically because of that. Originally, Pirke Avot was 5 chapters, and this 6th chapter was really added so that this could be the period of time between Passover and Shavuot. We could study this because of its importance, because it kind of reminds us of the importance of not just freedom that we celebrate at Passover, but of course the law and our Torah, which is what Pirke Avot reminds us of. As we read throughout, especially the chapter 6 really talks about why Torah is so important, why the process of studying Torah is so important. But if you recall, at the very beginning of Pirke Avot, when we first started this several months ago, we actually looked at the very, very beginning of Pirke Avot, chapter 1, which would have told you that the very beginning, this is where it all started for us when we started Pirke Avot, that Moses received the Torah at Sinai, which is what we celebrate at Shavuot, roughly the time that after we left Egypt that we found ourselves at Mount Sinai, about 2.5 months or about 2 months later. We were 7 weeks later, roughly, we were at Mount Sinai, and we got the Torah. So we went from freedom to the responsibility and the covenant and the organization and the mission of Torah. And so at the very beginning of Pirke Avot, it says that Moses received the Torah at Sinai, transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, elders the prophets, prophets the men of great assembly. And then after looking at that transmission, which again, to the rabbis, or to the, even before we'd even call them the rabbis, who saw themselves as the inheritors of this great assembly. Some people say it's like the proto-Sanhedrin or some kind of group of people who help decide Jewish law. Then we have this saying that they have, which is again what we have after that, a rabbi with a saying, and we, by the time we get to chapter 6, we kind of left that, even though chapter 6 does go back to some of those. By the time we get to the very end, which is where we are right now, we've read through the rabbis, and again, here we have a non-attributed saying, and then we have a rabbi that's going to comment. But what we're going to do today is take a look at the totality kind of Pirke Avot and kind of reflect on it, because there aren't many chapters of the Mishnah or of any Talmud text that we can digest and then kind of understand it, because in some cases the chapters are so long and the texts are so long, let's say 150 pages, and then those are double-sided, so it comes out to 300 pages. I mean, it's just an enormous, these sections of the Talmud are enormous, and it's almost hard to digest and to kind of summarize and to really even remember the totality of it, because it's so enormous, each one of the chapters, or each one of the, the sections, the tractates. but Pirke Avot, you can look at it, and it's really, again, one of the reasons why it's the most famous section of the Talmud, because it is, you can see the whole project, and of course, because of the ability for us to have these wonderful lessons that have been taught to us. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. And I promise tonight, we're going to talk about what we're going to be doing on Wednesday nights in the future. But as we finish with this last text, and to some extent, this kind of is a great way to, and I'm sure it was intended that way, to kind of sum up Pirke Avot. You have this final text, chapter 6, verse 11. Whatever the Holy One, the Holy Blessed One, and again, it's either Holy One or Holy Blessed One, but again, in this case, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how you want to translate that, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, created in his world, he created only for his glory. As it is said, all who are linked to my name, whom I have created, formed, and made for my glory. That's a line from Isaiah. And it says, the Lord shall reign forever and ever. Okay? Which is a phrase that we use all the time. It's part of the Michamocha. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. And we use it during the Amidah, during the Kedusha, all these times that we go back to that line. Of course, it's from the Shirat Hayam. It's from the Song of the Sea. It's from chapter 15. It's from when we cross the Sea of Reeds, which of course is what we're thinking about right now. So that's the first part of it. Everything that God made in this world was created for his glory. So why did God create everything, including us? For God's own glory. This is a reflection of God's glory, all of creation. Said Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia, it pleased the Holy Blessed One to grant merit to Israel. That is why he gave them the Torah and the commandments in abundance. As it is said, the Lord was pleased for his righteousness to make Torah great and glorious, which is also a line from Isaiah. Now, as the rabbis come to the end of this kind of great set of rules and laws and sayings and reminders and great wisdom, we finish with this line that reminds us that this whole process of understanding Torah, which again includes this, even though we wouldn't say, but this is written by people. Is this Torah too? And the rabbis say unequivocally and unabashedly, this is Torah too, right? When they're talking about the Torah being passed from Moses to Joshua and down to them, they're not talking just about the written Torah. They're talking about the oral Torah. They're talking about this right now. What they're doing. They saw this as part of the Torah given to the people orally, taught orally from one generation to the other, and then finally written down. So they're not talking about the Torah scroll alone. They're talking about the oral Torah that they saw as being passed down. So what makes us great, and what makes us chosen, if you will, isn't that God likes us and just said, those are people I really like. There's something really great about them. The way that was expressed, at least according to our ancestors, and this is really important, because if Jews are talking about what makes them special, for us, it comes down to getting the Torah and the mitzvot, not some genetic secret that makes us intrinsically better than other people. It's because we have the Torah. Our merit is only reflected in the fact that we have the Torah. So this is what they saw. as. That's what they saw this as. So for people who want to walk around and go, hey, look how great we are because we're God's chosen people, it comes with the fact that we understand that to be because we have the Torah. It's not just because we're Jewish, but because we actually have the Torah. So I had a call today from somebody, and I've had a call 3 out of the last 4 days from people who are not Jewish who called to say, and I'd play you this message because it's saved, but I don't want to because their name is on it, and I don't want to, the person didn't call and expect for their name to be played. But I'll just read you a part of the transcript of this message, okay? So this was a message today. Here's one. Okay. We've been getting a lot of calls for Passover too, but I'm not reading you that one. I'm reading not the Passover one. Here's what I wanted to read, okay? I'm just reading it to you. I'm not going to say the person's name. I am not of the Jewish faith, and certainly my husband and I just want to voice our support for Israel and for those of your family and congregation. We are certainly calling all of our government officials to convey that message as well. These are crazy times, and we're just so sorry for you and for those of your faith for what you're going through. You are the chosen, so I'm sure that is a comfort. Take care. Thank you very much. I don't think you need my number, but then she provided it. That's the message that came yesterday. And there was another message that came Sunday.
And I get messages from friends that don't understand what's happening.
Yeah,
They're blaming Israel.
I understand. But I'm telling you, I've had calls like that. I'm not gonna say I've had them every day because I didn't have one on Monday, but I had one Sunday, I had one Tuesday, and I had one today. So 3 out of the last 4 days, I've had a call like that. It's come to the temple or it's come directly to me. And that one specifically said exactly what I just said, which is that we're the chosen people. Now, what's interesting is that she said, I'm sure you take comfort in that. I don't know. There is definitely, there are times when I take comfort in that, but sometimes we're in that mode of, God, can't you choose somebody else, right? That's the
Right.
famous line. Please, God, can't you choose someone else for a change?
Portrays the person is really terrible and awful, and they wind up being Jewish. I go,
No, I
oh my
know.
God.
Well, that's
You have to make them Jewish.
no, that's true. That's true. We always have that fear that the villain in the movie is going to be turned out, but no, but it is a thing that you think about when you're watching the news Saturday night, wondering what's going to happen. That you're like, really, is this really have to play out all the time for us? So, like I said, it's part of our understanding of what that means. The merit that we have, the merit that God gives us, is not an inherent superiority. It's that we have the Torah and commandments. That's the way I understand it. That's the way my ancestors understood it. And I think it's an important understanding for us to know that that's part of the project. That's part of what we're doing here. That's part of the mission. So yeah, that's what I do with it. That's what I make of it. So it kind of ends the way it began, which is in the giving of the Torah. But like I said, pretty much all of chapter 6 is like this. For those who haven't read last week or the week before, that's pretty much all of chapter 6 is really focusing on that. The other chapters, as we went back over the last several months, we read, things that touch more on morality or touch more on more on our understanding of Jewish philosophy, or our understanding of what our jobs are in this world, or maybe what happens to us after we die, or what are the priorities that we need to focus on in this world that are not necessarily just Torah. This famous one that we read, be careful in your dealings with the ruling authorities, right? They don't befriend a person unless it's in their own needs. We talked about, like, it's just like a common sense saying to remind people that the government uses people, but that's not necessarily based on the Torah. It's a common sense kind of words of wisdom.
Mhm.
So as we've gone through this, and again, almost everyone here has been here for multiple weeks. As we finish Pirke Avot today, I want to engage in a little bit more of a dialogue. So I know it's a little harder when we have so many people joining us, not in the room, but it's also good because besides Joanne and Mary, who are here, and I had no idea who was going to be here in person. I never do, but it's actually for 90% of the people here, you're all in the same situation, which is you're at home and you're part of this discussion and dialogue. For those that are watching us online right now, I will make an attempt to look and check as we're having this discussion. But I want to open it up to you guys now, to everybody who's online and everybody who's been with us. I want you to go back, and again, I know it's hard because you don't have the text under your control in front of you, but does anyone want to just on their own, on their own initiative, and I'll try to pop to it if I can remember exactly where it is. Does anyone want to just kind of jump in with one of the lines from this that stuck out in their minds, or one of the ones that as they read it has kind of become part of their, you kind of feel like that really spoke to you? Anybody have any lines, any of their lines from Pirke Avot that stood out? This is I just happen to be in chapter 2 right here, which is kind of the center of it, if you will. But anybody have any lines that they remember over the last few months that they really have taken away from with this? Don't all jump in at once. Joanne's going first. Wait, one second. I'm going to let Joanne speak. Okay. I'm going to give her the mic.
My, okay. Part of it, I don't remember if it was the first or second chapter, but it was, to me, it was depressing because they were talking about tearing flesh off people.
Well, that might have been me telling the story of Rabbi Akiva.
Maybe.
That could have been my edition of Rabbi Akiva. There is this one about flesh, which is more flesh, more worms. But that was Rabbi Hillel talking about the fact that the more you've enjoyed in this world, you just become more food for the worms. But no, the Rabbi Akiva story, I said in connection to some of the sayings that Rabbi Akiva said himself, which are kind of amazing given what happened to him in his life. The fact that Rabbi Akiva had such a kind of a positive outlook, knowing that, again, the rabbis knew when they included all these texts, they knew what happened to Rabbi Akiva. They knew here's some of the lines that Rabbi Akiva said, the very famous one, Hakol Tzafui, everything is foreseen, yet freedom of choice is granted. And the world is judged with goodness, right? So, but somebody else was going to say something. Cheryl or David, I think.
I have something.
Oh, okay. Mike?
Chapter 5, verse 20.
Okay.
Says,
By the way, everybody can go on their own and go, if you want to go to Safaria, you can go and,
oh no, I have it on my picture that you gave me.
okay. All right. So I'm going to go up to it. Yeah.
It says, at least on what you wrote, Judah ben Tima used to say, be as swift as an eagle to do the will of your parent in heaven.
Yep. And so I mean, that was partly because of your love of eagles, but what
And it
about,
also has to do with my parents and everything else.
okay.
And my love, obviously, of an eagle.
Yeah, that's a good one. And we read that one just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we did.
So that's a pretty powerful one. Somebody else
I
was
think so.
gonna-
And
Something.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
the part where you reference Rabbi Zoma and
Oh, yeah.
learning from others, the self-control. Yeah, and
Yeah,
the
let me get to
concept
that one.
of being
that one-
content with life.
Yeah, that's that
And
was at
then
the end.
and then respecting or honoring those that honor the Lord.
Yeah, that is one of the best, I think, too. The Rabbi Ben Zoma, right?
Yes.
So here it is. Here's Ben Zoma, who is wise, one who learns from every man. Yeah. Who is mighty, the one who controls his own impulses, right? And who is rich, the one who's happy in his lot, right? And who is honored, the one who honors other people. This is such a powerful way of looking at how do we find success and happiness, and how do we measure our accomplishments. And that one is definitely one that stays with you. Yeah, thanks for popping that one in, David. Anybody else?
And
What?
further, in addition
Yeah.
to not just what's written here, but your retelling the scenario with him and with Akiva and the other three or the other two, the four that went off. I mean, there's a story behind the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And the story of Ben Zoma, not being able to handle the experience of going into
Right.
paradise. That's a pretty powerful lesson too, when we think about the backdrop of what happens to him. And again, the next guy who's mentioned is Ben Azai, all these people that were part of the inner circle of Akiva. And then again, this great line of Ben Azai too, right? Don't despise any person, right? Because you never know when that person will have their hour, right? And I think about that. I think about that line, because especially when you're a kid, right? It's so easy to look at people and diminish them or make fun of them. Especially kids do it all the time. And sometimes those people that people bullied or made fun of, they wind up being the most successful people there. And I always thought to myself, I used to hate that. I wondered if people who were mean to someone because they thought they were a nerd or a loser or whatever, wondered if they ever then felt bad for what they did. I mean, I kind of hope they do, but I guess if you're going to be mean to someone in the first place, it's probably not you're probably not thinking about those things.
There is an NCIS episode, and one of the agents makes it a mission to go back to look for somebody that allegedly he bullied when they were much younger. He finds this man and apologizes to him for what he did. And the man is very successful, very big, and says to the agent, "You are mistaken. You didn't bully me. It was me that bullied you. And somehow over the years, you changed it to make it better for you." Reality was modified in his mind. It was really a twist.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting. Like he didn't tell the story to himself in an honest way.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
I,
what,
rem- I, re- I remember I only went to summer camp, Jewish summer camp one summer. I didn't like it at all. The kids all knew each other, or most of them knew each other. And the ones who didn't, I had one friend who was there and we were, kind of hung out together. But I remember there was one kid in my bunk who was kind of, he was awkward. He was kind of, he was kind of he looked like he was going to get beaten up. And, I kind of felt bad for him. I was like, I made an effort to be nice to him. And I didn't really have a lot in common with them. And, I grew up in the North Valley. I was on the poor side of town, and he was one of the richer kids from the South Valley. But I remember after camp, he reached out to me. He wanted to hang out and do stuff. And I felt like I had done my mission in camp by befriending him and trying to make him feel like not alone, because it was pretty bad. He was getting treated pretty bad, but I didn't like hang out with him. Like afterwards, I didn't. It's not like I didn't like. I mean, we just didn't have anything in common, and I didn't stay in touch with him. And I remember a couple of years later, like fast forward like 3 or 4 years later, and I was playing football, and he was we went to play at El Camino over in West Hills, the Jewish side of town, and I was looking at the pregame book, and the guy was on the other team. And I'm telling you, when he was in camp with me, this guy was a little weed. Like, he literally looked like he was going to get beaten up by anybody. And now this guy was a big football player. And, I looked at him, I'm like, I didn't even recognize him. And I saw him on the field. I'm like, no, this guy turned out to, be a pretty good looking guy. And he, I looked at him, I was like, I felt sorry for this guy. Now this guy looks like he's going to do just fine. And I remember thinking to myself, it's funny how you never know what's going to happen to people. And I never stayed in touch with them. I didn't really look him up or, necessarily know what happened to him later, but he definitely looked like, everything ended up being okay for him. I don't know, maybe it didn't, but it looked that way from the outside. Superficially, it looked like he turned out just fine. Like he would have friends, and it wasn't like I had to feel sorry for him. So when I was a kid and first read this, I always thought to myself, yeah, you never know. You never know when someone's going to finally find their place and fit in. And not that I was not going to be nice to him in the first place, but I always thought to myself, gosh, if you're mean to somebody and they wind up, what happened if you then have to sit there and get interviewed by the guy one day as you want to work for his company, the guy looks at you now, I remember you used to treat me like garbage. I always felt like that must happen occasionally. Probably used to happen more frequently when people, stayed in one town, in one community. But I always thought to myself, that line from the Talmud, from Pirke Avot, is just always so true. It's like, you never know when that person's going to find their time. And I hope it happens. I hope everyone finds a place and finds their hour and finds their moment where they can shine. But gosh, it's a comforting, to me, that's a comforting knowledge. And it's not necessarily Torah. It's not necessarily like, this is a mitzvah or something like that, but it does inspire you. And that's why these lines are so real, because like that line, gosh, it could be written today.
That's right.
Somebody give me one that they'd put on a bumper sticker or wear on their t-shirt. Mary, you have one that she says the words to live by, but you could make a poster of it, anybody? Somebody else got one? No?
what I'm thinking of is not from this. It's
Right.
from the 3 survivors of the Hamas attack that were in the temple and told their story. And somebody asked, did you suffer post-traumatic stress disorder? And it was assumed that they would, and somebody else from the audience added, no, you now have post-traumatic strength. And I was very deeply touched by that, because that is what they got in their hour. They developed post-traumatic strength, because they went through this terrible experience and came out, I think, bigger than when they went in.
I hope so. I hope so.
It seemed that
I
way.
think everyone who was there felt that way. I think it gave us it definitely gave us some strength. So yeah, thank you. That kind of happened in the midst of towards the end of our studies, obviously, but I do think that sometimes those lessons that we get from life, we
Yes.
put them into context and look, Joyce just formulated a new one, which is, you could have post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic strength,
And they seemed to grow with their experience rather than shrink from it. And it
yeah,
was a terrible experience.
yeah. And I think the fact that we had a really nice turnout, obviously the room looked full, and I think they felt like, I don't know how many people they expected. We didn't really say. I said we'd have 50 to 60 people, and we were pretty close. I think definitely if you add how many people joined us online, we had over 70 or 80, and many more have watched since. So and then hundreds, if not thousands of people saw the article in the paper. I think, yeah, hopefully, as Joyce has said, hopefully the experience of feeling that support will help them. I hope that we gave them something, because I think that I can only speak for myself, and for some people have expressed this too, but I think everyone has felt this. We feel a little frustrated and a little impotent on this, because like, what can we do? What can we do? And giving these kids that comfort and giving them that opportunity made me feel like we are doing a little bit. And again, I mean, I brought them there, but if nobody had showed up, that would have been pretty disappointing, and would have given them the exact opposite message. So everybody who showed up, and everyone who's watched, and everybody who has given strength by your support and by your positive energy on this, you've done something. You've actually done something tangible to make this situation, at least for these three people. And then who knows the other people that they talked to that were with them, their other friends or other people in Israel who they went back to and said, we went to this little town in the middle of LA, in the middle of the country. I mean, out there, probably looked around saying, how, is there anybody who's going to come out tonight? And they said, and now they feel like this group of people that gave them support have helped them, deal with
Right.
again, just a horrific
A
situation. So
nightmare, a nightmare.
I think that is an example which kind of jumps ahead to something that I wanted to get to next, but Joyce has kind of introduced it, accidentally. But before I kind of put that out there again, anybody else from the stuff that we read, any lines or anything that sticks out, anything that people have found themselves thinking about or quoting or throwing through their minds, recycling, if you will, anything else? John, anything that you've been sticking out in your mind?
I don't know where John is, but this is Glory.
I'm here.
Glory?
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh.
I'm here. I was, as everybody was so focused on certain things, I was kind of frustrated with myself because there was so much stuff. I wish I had taken notes, because had I known there was going to be a Q&A, right?
Well, because there isn't normally, John. That's okay. This is
but I
said.
like that. So now I'm
Okay.
focused on. I'll take notes. I showed you that book that I was reading. I still have it, Jiminy Crickets. I had it for a year, and there's multiple sections about different things, and one of them was Pirke Avot. And I was so hoping that we were going to study this, and we did. And I wish I could point to one line. There were so many. What's interesting to me is what was so applicable 2,500 years ago in so many of these things, if not most of them, is applicable today. I was just scrolling through a few things. One of them was, oh, Jiminy Crickets. It was with oh, Jimmy, I think it was 3, Pirke Avot 3. And I thought, I really thought that it was the first couple lines. Hold on, let me get there. Hold on. Where there is no Torah, there is no right conduct. And that strikes me for different reasons than everybody, because remember we talked about education, how Jews were
Yes.
the first to require.
Mhm.
Okay, so maybe it was Torah, maybe it wasn't reading, writing, arithmetic, right? But they were right. We were taught from an early age, 2,500 years ago, with no Torah, there was no right conduct, and there's no
Mhm.
right conduct because they had to study Torah, right?
Yep.
So as I was scrolling through so many lines, but that one, you try to teach your kids right and wrong, right? And so I think it's you made a statement that I thought was pretty interesting. You said that it's not because of our bloodline or who we are, it's because of the Torah, right?
Right.
Right? Think
Yep.
about that. It's because of the education of the Torah when we were, and it's gone through generation to generation to generation. Okay, all right. So maybe my folks, 100 generations later, it wasn't about the Torah; it was about education. I mean, I did get bar mitzvah, and we were Jewish and all that stuff, but it wasn't like we were Hasidic and I studied Torah all the time. But it was about education. So, you know, and that's something I think everyone here has passed through to their children is education. Education, education, education. That'll not change.
Yeah. No, it's a
And you
good
won't have
point.
you won't have knuckleheads, right?
Yeah. So,
I think if the 3 amigos had studied Torah, right?
well,
I'm just saying.
you just touched on something that again is an interesting point to think about, which is, look, there's no question that in America, Jewish Americans have become somewhat disconnected and illiterate when it comes to Torah and it comes to their stuff. But I will tell you this, and it's not an excuse. Maybe it's an excuse partially, but I honestly believe this. Because in other countries that are not like America, the further you get away from America, this is what happens. Well, let me tell you what happens, but let me first explain. One of the reasons why, to some extent, Torah knowledge and our connection to this has become less important is because we take for granted how much of what we just read is part of our daily life as Americans. And so when we talk about the principles and values that the rabbis are talking about, when we talk about, creating what type of values we're surrounded by on a daily basis. So much of this sounds comfortable to us is because this is part of our greater society. We share so many of these values with our Gentile neighbors that it's almost as if we've been living in a country where the things that we've been teaching for thousands of years are part of the daily experience that we have as Americans. And so to some extent, when we go around, well, you got to learn that, this is, that everyone, that education is important, the dignity that the dignity of another individual is important, that we treat people not based on their caste or their status, but that the line we just read, that every person has their moment. Do you understand? These are part of American ideals, that everybody, it doesn't matter how you were born or where you were born, but you have a chance to succeed in this country.
Yes.
That's a Jewish concept. Because, we take it for granted that the Torah says things like this and that the Talmud says things like everybody has their place. Everyone has their moment to shine. Folks, if you grew up in a system, in a caste system, but that's not, the religion teaches you that you're part of a caste and a hierarchy. There's absolutely no way that that idea comes through. It means
Right.
absolutely nothing. It's actually it's counterintuitive, and it's counter to the values around you. You're not surrounded by that value. And so when you read something like that, you're like, what does that even mean? For us as Americans, we read this and we go, yeah, I agree with that. And this is something that I think, because we're American, we take for granted these kinds of ideas. This idea that, again, where there's no bread, the part that John was talking about, where there's no right conduct, no Torah, the most famous part of that is the Ein Kemach, Ein Torah, right? If there's no flour, if there's no livelihood, there is no Torah. That's a reminder that you got to work, that you have to have a job, that you have to have sustenance, physical sustenance, in addition to the mystical and legal and moral guidelines. You also have to have a life. All of those kinds of things are things that we take for granted because they're American ideas. If you go to some places where you could sit in a monastery, supported, again, I'm not picking on individual countries, but there are countries where, you have millions of monks that believe that there is no need for anything in this world. So these are ideas that are part of our culture, that are part of our daily life, and we don't need to have necessarily somebody come in
This
and
meeting
tell us
is being recorded.
that's only a Jewish idea. Because, again, I think it's an American idea. So much of this is is part of our daily lives. So that's part of it. And I think, again, I don't think I'm making an excuse for that lack of knowledge on our part, because the last part that I already hinted at was, in those countries where the Jewish community does not have that on a daily basis, those communities tend to be much more Torah literate, and that people engage more in Jewish study because the study is necessary, because they don't find it around them. And I'll give you an example. This. There are still tens of thousands, but not 100,000, but in the tens of thousands of Jews that are scattered across a few Muslim countries today, primarily Morocco, Turkey, and there are, believe it or not, still several thousand Jews in Iran. Those communities, the Jewish communities, are very tightly knit and very protective of each other. And they're also, all of those kids virtually go to a Jewish school. They don't go to public schools or state schools, if you will. Those kids are completely living in almost a Talmudic educational kind of system, where they're reading this on a daily basis. But they have to, because they live in societies where these laws aren't being practiced and these values aren't seeping through every day of their lives. And those are extreme versions of it. But I would say the more that a country is devoid of these values, the higher the level of Jewish connection and Jewish education is necessary. So I also see it from the experience of when it doesn't happen. So it'd be easy for me just to say it because I'm making an excuse for American Jewish illiteracy, but I'm not. I think it's based on fact, and I think it's based on what I see and what I've seen. So thankfully, we live in a country where a lot of these values, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't learn them. We definitely should learn that we've been having these, we've been perpetuating these values for 2,500 years. But it's not just a matter of pride in the fact that we've had these, but more importantly, that we now live in a time where these are values that our neighbors would subscribe to as well. So yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. I'm very
Yeah.
curious. You mentioned the caste system and that India had lived many, many years under the caste system. What has changed recently? They seem to be coming into a new attitude, and they're more technology is going there, more things are coming out of India. What has changed there that allowed this new attitude?
Well, I think you said it. A lot of it's technology and
Ah.
and the economy becoming more free market and
Yes.
people becoming more westernized. Their birth rate has also gone down significantly. They're starting to be able to manage their birth rate, and they're being able to manage that system. I will tell you that one of the things that helped, change the caste system is it was a commitment by some of the political parties, especially the party that Gandhi and Nehru founded, the Congress Party, that helped do away with the caste system and definitely moved people towards a more progressive system. And again, a lot of that was also at the time pretty socialist too. It was married to a kind of a socialist attitudes to the economy, but as it's changed. I will tell you, there's another factor there too, which is that one of the reasons why Islam grew in India over the last 100 years or so, and part of it is ironic because you'd say, well, when Pakistan split off from India, and again, the only difference between Pakistan and India, there was no Pakistan ever. It was Muslim parts of India that seceded in 1947 and became a Muslim country, but there was no Pakistan. There was no country ever called Pakistan. It literally was an artificial creation of those Muslim sections of India, but and obviously what became Bangladesh. But one of the things that Islam succeeded with then, and especially over the last 200 years or so, was because Islam took people out of the caste system into a non-caste system. The Hindus realized that their system of religion was encouraging people to bail out of it because if Islam told them that once they became Muslim, they were no longer part of a caste system, they're like, why the heck would I be part of your religion? You're telling me that I'm the lowest caste because because of where I was born or who I was born to? They're like, who needs that? And they became Muslim. And you can understand why. Who needs that? So Islam succeeded, especially amongst the poorer and the more oppressed caste system. And so to some extent they had to give it up because it was killing their religion because they were losing adherence. The system met
It doesn't work.
it met modernity, and it also met a time when you could have full exchange of ideas. Like it used to be if you lived in a Hindu town, a Hindu village, and you were in a lower caste and you decided to become Muslim, they'd kill you just because they said you're not going to the other side. But nowadays you can't kill somebody, not that they don't, but you're not supposed to kill somebody for changing religion. And in a free market system of religious ideas, people were bailing out, and they were like, well, if I can bail out and there's no consequence to it, I'm not going to stay as a part of this religion. So that's one of the reasons why India and even those more Hindu parts of the country have changed, because they couldn't compete. You can't compete with an anti-caste system. But yeah, Judaism always kind of had a problem with that, even though there were, priests. We had a priestly class. There's no question there was a priestly caste to some extent. Aside from that region of the country, which it hasn't been relevant for 2,000 years,
Right.
and that really affected. Remember, in the caste system for Kohanim, you also had to be part of the job of taking care of the temple. There were responsibilities. And also, by the way, significantly going back to the biblical period, if you were a Kohen, you couldn't technically own land. You didn't have a tribal portion. So there was a trade-off that kind of kept Kohanim in some sense. They got the honor of being in the temple, and they got food, and they got stuff from being a Kohen, but they also didn't get to, be shepherds or be commercial, in commercial business in those days, which would allow them to increase their wealth and increase their family size and all those things that people wanted to do. So there was a trade-off for being a part of the priestly caste system, if you will. And again, I wouldn't say it was a caste. It was more of a it was more of a job and a
Division of duties.
yeah, exactly. It was not like, well, there's a priest and then there's this and then there's that. It's you almost have to have more than one class in order to have a caste system. Got to have more than one group. So anyways, so, and again, it's been irrelevant for 2,000 years for us. So when we go into Pirke Avot and kind of like take a pull back and look at the macro picture of Pirke Avot, you know, we see how Jewish wisdom has been handed down by these sayings, this aneclectic wisdom, which interestingly, for example, to compare it to other traditions, as we're talking about some other traditions, obviously in Chinese culture, there was what we call the sayings of Confucius, which I always enjoyed too. I used to read those. I thought those were interesting, the sayings of Confucius. It turns out that they probably weren't written by one person. And the fact that like they all had to be sayings of Confucius where it was interesting that it all had to be attributed to one person. But again, those were probably sayings that were gathered and taken over time. But the idea here with Pirke Avot was that lots of people were contributing to this. This was a group effort. It was a group effort that goes on over hundreds of years. So it's something where people were able to add to it. They were able to build this, you know, this wonderful kind of library by recognizing that these voices, these people were coming in and were able to be quoted. And gosh, think about it. If you were Ben Azai or, you know, whoever, Rabbi Tarfon, that thousands of years later, people are still thinking about the words you say. That's pretty amazing, you know? I mean, at least to me, that's astounding that somebody would take something that you say and still say that this person said it. And we actually we read one of the lines that just last week, that when you give credit to somebody, you know, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? By making sure that you acknowledge. We talked about how the example that they gave was that
Instead of plagiarizing.
Yes, not to plagiarize. You can get in trouble. Even if you're a university president, you're going to get in trouble. Right, right. So we read someone who thus you have learned, everyone who says a thing in the name of him who said it brings deliverance into the world, as it is said, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. So Esther did this amazing thing of saving her people. But what was actually also at stake? Esther said in Mordecai's name, by giving him credit, this is part of what we do to bring deliverance into the world. So again, they add, you know, that's not necessarily why she brought deliverance into the world. She was able to remind Ahasuerus of what Mordecai did and then tell him about what Haman was doing and all those other kind of things. But they attribute it to the fact that, again, she says something in Mordecai's name, which again, why is it so important to give people credit? You'll be like Esther. Whatever you think you're doing, by just giving the credit, you're actually going to be doing something much more, much bigger. So that's really, really important. And gosh, I got to tell you, I've always lived in fear of plagiarizing somebody, so much so that like I'll if I write something and I think it's really, really good, I'll take that quote, I'll put it in quotes and I'll look it up just to make sure that I didn't plagiarize or you know, take someone's quote. So and it's hard because like even if I quote myself, even if and I've gotten away from doing that, though I did quote myself in this last article for the Signal, actually, but I pointed out that I was quoting myself, that I yeah, I'm careful because if I don't remember it, like if I had quoted somebody before and if I didn't ascribe it to them and I quoted myself, I'm still not quoting myself. I'm actually still plagiarized myself, and I plagiarized it from somebody else in the first place. So I'm very careful not to do that. I really don't want to, I don't ever want to plagiarize someone. So normally when I sit down and write a sermon, and I'll quote people all the time, and sometimes I'll quote, a major idea. I'll always give the person credit who's, I remember a couple of years ago, I wrote about Jonathan Haidt, and he's a social scientist who actually just wrote a wonderful piece in the Atlantic about how cell phones and technology have destroyed uh, the self-esteem and the mental health of our young people right now. How social media and how this has just been devastating. So it's an article a lot of people have been talking about. Haidt's article, but he had written something about how our country has become fragmented politically, and I talked about how conservatives and liberals have different values, but different value. They preference certain things differently, and they don't recognize that they're all important values. It's just some of them put those values in kind of a different priority. So anyways, I had quoted it years ago when I first was kind of talking about why our country is getting too fragmented politically. But anyways, but I quoted him. I mentioned, I talked about his concept and gave him full recognition for this. But yeah, it's something that the rabbis took very seriously, which is why this book promotes and quotes people directly so that they knew who said what. So it really is important, and it's a value that we hold dear. So now, on that note, I want to do something that's even maybe harder, but it's something that I think is, when we've studied Pirke Avot, and definitely we don't always get to study Pirke Avot. I mean, I've studied Pirke Avot in one afternoon. It's been years since I did it, but 20 something years ago, we did a one-day Pirke Avot, highlights, if you will. We took 20 lines, but afterwards we did something, and I really like doing this. And again, I don't remember where I first saw this, but I didn't come up with the idea, but I'm going to throw this out now to people. When we look at Pirke Avot, especially the earlier sections, we'll have the person's name. Like here's Shmuel HaKatan, which means little Shmuel. Little Shmuel. He's Hakatan. He's the little guy. Shmuel HaKatan. Now, it could be that there was Shmuel HaGadol, who was not necessarily a big guy, but well known. But it's also possible that he was just a little Shmuel. There was, a little guy. But sometimes we have people, we have a rabbi, and he'll say who his father was. Sometimes we'll have a person, for example, of Rabbi Levitas, a man of Yavne, which tells us where he's from. So now I'm going to ask people, and usually I give people a little time to sit with this, but maybe there's somebody who wants to jump in right away, and then other people can think about it as they wrap their heads around this. This is a tough one. This is a tough one, John. This isn't just taking notes. This is a tough one. I want a valiant volunteer to give me their saying that they live by, or a saying that they would want to be known by. And I want you to tell me how you'd want to be known, either the son or daughter of somebody, where you're from, what you do. Because there was a guy named Rabbi Yossi Hassan, the sandal maker. Sometimes they were known by their jobs. Sometimes they were known like this guy by where his hometown was. So it could be Joanne of Detroit says, because she's very proud of Detroit. So, but there could be, you know, again, in this case, Ben Zoma and Ben Azai are just known by their dad's names. That's a tough one, by the way, if you're only known by your dad's name. I used to deal with that a lot. People knew me as Phil's son, man. People, it happens less now, but I used to get that a lot. Still happens. People, it happens less. But man, I'm nearly 60 and it's still happening. And unfortunately, he's been gone for almost 5 years and it still happens. But it's in a nice way too. It's a nice way of honoring him. But people will say, "You're Phil's son, aren't you?" But it happens less, unfortunately, as people who've passed who knew him. But anyways, you get that. You get that. But anybody want to throw out there?
Yeah, I'll throw out something that I live by.
Let's go. Mike, you're first.
Well, first I want to be known as Mayor Ben Casil.
Okay.
But in English, because I don't know it in Hebrew, is you can't change the past, but you can create the future.
That's awesome. Is that your saying or did you?
That is my
modify it?
saying. No, that is my
Okay.
saying. I had an issue with a cousin and I came up with that and that's how I live.
You can't change the past,
But you can create the future.
but you can create the future. Nice, very nice. Can't change the past, but you can create the future. Definitely one to be thinking about. That's not exactly said here. I mean, there's definitely, some talk about, everything is, that famous one that we read that we always talk about, Kol Tsafui, everything is destined, but free. Well, it's right here, right? Everything is foreseen, yet freedom and
Right.
choice is granted. But that's different. What Mike says is a little different. But
Similar,
that's
but yeah.
a little bit about your fate or your past and your future. Excellent. That's a great start. Anybody else? Anybody else want to jump in with who they are and what they would like to be known for? Look,
this is like high school.
This is super important, folks. I would say that this is a legacy. This is part of your legacy, right? This is part of, like, I want that my kids to know, like, come on, John, what do you want your kids to know that you
Well,
said?
this is like you're asking us to write our headstone or our epitaph.
Maybe, but think about it this way. If your kids don't know it, then they should, right? If they don't know it, they should. And you can tell them, look, I want you to know this. And
No,
hopefully there's more than just that. But so you got one?
I don't know how to put it, but my kids always say, my mother can do anything.
So what would you say? First of all, what are you known as, Joyce?
I'm not sure what I'm known as. I know that I'm looked up to. I know that I'm appreciated. I know that I'm loved.
So what's your name though?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. You could be Joyce of Detroit too, by the way.
No, no,
I
no.
know. You're of everywhere. You've lived in LA for almost longer than Detroit, right?
Yes, I lived in Detroit until 77 and from 77 to now here in California.
There you go.
So,
All right. There you go. So you would kind of put it down as you can do anything.
yes. And that's what my kids say about me. There's
That's
nothing
nice.
my mother can't do.
That's nice. Anybody?
I wish I had those words of wisdom. You just put me on my deathbed, and
Well, you don't have to wait. That's the point. You don't have to wait until you're dead before you make sure your kids know this. John, come on, you got to come up with it.
Mine is I do the best I can. Live by example, and don't ask someone to do something you're not willing to do yourself.
That's a great one.
I like all of those.
That's great. So what are you known as though, John?
What am I known as?
Yeah.
Oh, Jiminy Crickets. You know what I'm known as? What people
Yeah.
don't know is that I'm a nice person, but everybody thinks I'm a hard butt,
No,
right?
no, wait a second.
No,
No,
I
no,
don't.
that's not.
Well,
No.
I
I, I
do.
you know I guess the golden rule I try to teach my boys: don't judge a book by the
Okay,
cover.
but what are
I
you
don't
known
have
as?
one line.
John the nice guy? Come on.
Uh,
What do you, what I would say, I would say, I would say at least some people would say, because look, I don't know that it's the only thing, but it's definitely one of the things that stands out about John, right? Is he's a Marine, right? So we say John the
Yes.
Marine said, nothing wrong with that.
well, yeah, but but even younger, right? Participating in sports, being the leaders on the sports, always lead by example. Never ever ask
Yes.
someone to do something you're not willing to do
There
yourself.
you go. So that's
I like
UMC John said,
Yeah, but
UMC John said, lead by example. Never ask someone to do what you won't do. What you
but
would
it dovetailed into that training, right? It wasn't that it was always that, even prior to that. Maybe that's why I did it. But gosh, Mike had a great line. Joyce has a great, but it's there. Our lives, like yours, are so complicated. You can't
Yes.
you can't boil it down to one line.
No, of course not. Of course not. But
No regrets, right?
No
Don't have.
regrets.
I have so many regrets. Don't have regrets, fellas. Right?
yeah, well, some of them are, chances are a line like no regrets is going to not hold true.
Right.
So there are certain things that, like, and there's things that are a little trite. Like we put it on my mom's headstone was live, love, laugh. Cause she used that
Right.
motto. She put it on stuff and it's on her headstone. It says live, love, laugh. So but it's more because like we knew she liked that, but that was her thing. It was on her doormat. It was on her, she had a necklace. So that was her thing. So do I think that's not what we put that on the side, but we put another thing about her on the text, which to me, kind of summarized her better, but it was us saying it about her. It wasn't her saying. The one thing, it was funny because my dad never had, like, I never thought of, like, he never gave me like a saying that he said, would always say, you got to do this. You have to, this is the saying, right? So he didn't give me that kind of wisdom. He just led by example. And I learned, I knew what his value, I mean, I hear his voice all the time. But the one saying that he had that was like the perfect saying that I've now shared with my kids, and I always give them, they know that it's their grandfather's saying. I might have even told people this, but I did not put it on his tombstone, though it could have been funny actually. But this was the line. It was a setup. It's set up by the fact that I literally, I can remember the exact moment it happened. And it's not like he said this to me every day, though we did joke about it. So I'm at graduation for college. And, I literally, like a lot of people, crammed and made sure I got, I worked my tail off at the end to make sure that I could graduate, right? All I remember was not like I could have graduated a year early. I had to get everything done, took all my finals, did all my work. And by the time I got to graduation, to the ceremony, I was exhausted. So at graduation, I'm walking away from the graduation, and I said something to my dad like, oh man, I said, this last week was so tough. I said, I had so many papers and God, I'm really tired. I all these finals. And he said to me, son, from now on, every day is a final.
Oh my God.
So that line, every day
That's great.
is a final.
That's
It
a
was
wonderful
perfect
line.
because, like, he didn't, like, it wasn't like he wanted to say it in a profound way. He didn't, I remember the moment. He wasn't saying it to be like sarcastic, or he 100% meant it because he believed it. Yeah, he believed that like that work that you put in that week, because he knew, that I procrastinated and whatever I did that week I thought was hard. He was telling me, no, now real life begins. And he was right. I mean, he always kind of believed that college was, and he worked during college, but he always believed that college was a bit of an artificial, it's not real. That's not real. That's not the way your life is really going to be. Because you're living off of, your whatever, you understand what I'm saying. It's not real life. And however hard it is, it's not, and there's not consequences, but a final is a consequence. It is real hard work. And when you're in college, that to you seems like hard work. And it seems like that's like the payout. Like there's a payout, and there's like, you actually did something. So I think, I took that away, and I was like, dang, that's real.
Wow.
That
Yep.
was real. So, and again, he did not mean it in a sarcastic way. And I mean, he was 100% serious, and he was kind of reminding me that, now you got to start working. So, yeah, that was my one, like I said, that was my one there. Anyway,
Are you gonna say that to Shira? Oh, sorry, Mike.
oh, if
It's
I'm
okay.
going to say, I've said it to all I've said it to my kids before they even went to college. So I kind of told them before college that, yeah, we're taking care of you during college, but then every day is the final after that. After that, you're on your own. And they kind of knew that was the expectation was, yeah, we know, we're all in on the joke that college is not real life. And we wanted them to enjoy college. We wanted them to have a good time. We wanted them to make the most of college, but we were 100% like, but so they all knew the story, and they knew how hard my dad worked. They knew that his whole life was work, and it's not like he didn't have he did what he wanted to do, and that was what he wanted to do. So his work was what he wanted to do. But yeah, it was it was definitely a saying that kind of became one of our, now it's become one of our family sayings. Every day.
Glory's gonna get mad at me if she has one.
Every day is the final. All right, Glory, what is it?
She's getting mad at me.
Okay.
Well, I'm not perfect at it, but I've always been taught do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So, I think about that, and I was listening to what you said about the bullying and stuff like that. And I was always kind of like you. I gravitated toward the ones that people bullied and tried to, befriend them and be kind to them and stuff like that. And I just feel like, to me, I'm so much happier by treating others the way I want to be treated. So that's my little thing in my head,
Yep. Yeah. We are going to get to
One more thing, Rabbi, and
Yeah.
and it's kind of a joke, but it's not, because my dad was a very serious person mostly. But he used to have a saying, and Mary knows it, and she's going to cringe when I say it. But he would say this, and it really means anything you want it to mean. But he would say, "Bluey, bluey, cock-a-looey." Okay, that's what he would say.
So what does that mean to you?
That means he loves me. I mean, that could mean anything you want it to mean.
Wow.
And he just loved doing that. He loved getting people to laugh because he was a serious person, but he would run around the house and say that.
You know what it means to me? It means,
What does it mean to you, John?
It means suck it up. Life doesn't get any easier.
There you go.
That's what it means.
But I think of that, And it, and I get emotional because my dad loved to say that.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one too, where people are known by a saying, even if it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, I can think of songs that my grandparents sang, that were like, Yiddish songs and things like that, that I would like hear and I'd be like, oh, that's like her number. Right. But yeah, there are things that people get attached to, that aren't necessary, that you, like you said, that can mean whatever you want it to mean. But yeah, it's an interesting one because yeah, I mean, look, I don't I don't have one. I mean, I have things that I I have things that I hope my kids take away from me, but as a way of summarizing what my values are, I mean, look, all of the things that we said today are all things that I believe in, and all the things that you guys shared. And it's hard when you read these to like think, hey, do I have anything that hasn't already been said by somebody 2,000 years ago that hasn't said in a pretty profound way? So it's difficult. It's difficult to for me to even come up with one, but I do think about it. I think about it not necessarily like every day, like what's my Pirke Avot? What's the thing that people are going to remember me for from as a one-liner? But I do think that I want, people, especially my family, to understand what my values were and what the principles were. And yeah, I mean, I think about it. I mean, I think about it a lot. So I think about it probably more than everyone here, because I mean, I have to think about it a lot. Because every time I publish something, or every time like I write an article for the Signal, I'm thinking about the fact that, like, am I okay with people saying, well, you said that? I don't want to look back on it a year or 10 years later going, I'm embarrassed by what I said. So I definitely think about this a lot.
What's interesting to me is my high school graduating class had a saying, and it keeps coming back to me over and over again, and
What's
I
that?
really like it. You
What
can
was that?
find a way or make one.
Mm,
And if there isn't a way that's obvious, well, then you keep working at it until you make one. And
yeah.
that's what it meant to me. And I have used that whenever I feel stuck. You haven't found a way, make one.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
can find a way or make one.
That's a great saying too.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Anybody else? Anybody else have any sayings? Maybe the other people sharing has inspired you to break out with one, or to now feel comfortable enough to share what's inside?
Well,
Anybody?
I guess I go back to the very first thing that was said about be wary of your dealings with the authorities, because they I can't think of a better way to say it than what is said in Pirke Avot, but I think it's certainly very, very wise. And it's my words to live by.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great one. And yeah, it's an important one to remember, is not to yeah.
Rabbi, it's interesting
Yeah.
that was just discussed, because I have my college roommate. He and I are we are just like peas and carrots. But we're we will always argue the opposite side no matter what it is, right? And the one thing he always says to me: always be wary of people that want power over you. even in a democratic environment. Always be
Mhm.
worried of people that have power over you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, definitely, definitely a thing to keep to. I was gonna go back to one of those. Yeah, some very powerful lines. Anybody else? Harvey, you're up in the state of Washington. Any
I can go back to when I first started working. And I think I worked about a month and I got thrown into a management position. And over the years, I learned it's not really me, it's my staff. And one day, my boss went up to his boss and said, "Look what I did." But he didn't do it. The staff did it. So I've always taken that into consideration. Anytime there was a report or anything that had to go up the line, I would always give credit or even have the person that did the work give the report, because they're the ones that are the important ones. And if they feel important, they will work important. And later on in my career, I worked and did a lot of production people, minimum wage, Hispanic, most of them. And when I walked the field and walked, the plant, you say hi to everybody, make them feel important. And it works. If you treat people nicely, they're going to do a better job.
Yeah.
And I follow that all the way through, even now. And on the other end, you have Sharon, who's got such an even temper. She could end a war easily because she doesn't raise her voice or anything. My cousin calls her Saint Sharon. So her claim to fame is an even temper.
Well, that's something that is in this one right here. An impatient person can't teach, a timid person can't learn, but the patience and being even tempered, the rabbis realized was an important part of having leadership position, because you need to have patience with people, and it's something that is important even for, again, the teacher or somebody who's in the position, in this case, in the rabbinic world. The teachers were the people in power, and they had to have patience. They had to have that. But again, yeah, this is this line that we talked about the government using us, and there are a lot of things here that Harvey just touched on about the way we treat people in business. That's something that the rabbis also talked about. He talked about giving honor to people. That, as we talked about throughout this section, it's all about giving credit to the people who say something, and making sure that you give credit, but also, again, making sure that people know that when you're doing business with somebody, that people trust you, that they that they can that they know that you're an honest person. That's obviously something that the rabbis talked about, even for those when they were teaching them who maybe they weren't going to spend as much time in the academy. They would tell people that however you're going to go conduct yourself in your daily business, make sure that you're treating people in your work environment in a respectful way. So So yeah, we didn't talk too much about the faith-based propositions or the ones that talked about heaven and the world to come, but obviously there were some texts about that. And, that oftentimes becomes, kind of a personal feeling, but this idea that, again, that the famous line that we had here, we read a few weeks ago, that this world is a vestibule. It's an anteroom
But
to
the world to
that's
come.
world to come, right? And so that's an interesting idea. There is a purpose for this world, right? There is a purpose for this existence. It's right here. The world is like a vestibule before the world to come. Prepare yourself in the vestibule so that you may enter the banqueting hall. So that's what our job is, to get ourselves ready, to get ourselves in order, to tidy ourselves up before we walk into the party. Look into the mirror one more time and straighten ourselves up, fix our toga before we go into the banqueting hall. So, yeah, there's a purpose for this room, but it's to get us ready for the next existence. So that's an interesting idea, one that kind of tells us that there is a purpose for this world, but that, again, there's another world or another existence that's going to be even better than this one, which is, again, whether or not we know that for sure, or we can prove it, or how do we understand that, or how do we know for sure? But this belief that this is just one level of existence is a really kind of comforting idea, and one that to me kind of makes sense. I don't know how else to say it other than, when I think about the possibilities, I don't think it's just a matter of wishful thinking. I think that the idea that existence is this is only one realm of existence just seems to me to make sense, based on how miraculous and how much about this existence in this world we still don't understand. I don't know when we'll know it, but I hopefully we'll have some better understanding of how this world works, how this universe works, and how we're a part of it. So I think that we'll look back on this line and say that we kind of understood this a long time ago. And it'll be consistent with what we know about scientifically or empirically. We'll say that, oh well, Jews knew that a long time ago. So I'm hoping that we give people more comfort. But anyways, so as we wrap this up, and again, think about, if we didn't come up with one, try to come up with one. Don't leave this alone. This desire or work that we have, whether there's a world to come or not, we do create a legacy in this world, and part of it is being known by our values and by the things that our friends and our families and the people who know us can say that they knew, how they knew us and how they were inspired by us, and how they can use us as examples and as role models and as inspirations for us after we pass from this world. So that's something to think about, and not to, again, this is the good thing. This is when John said jokingly, we're writing our epitaph. Yeah, to some extent, but we write our epitaph every day, whether we like it or not. And so the words that will be said about us, and the words that we want to be said about us, we have a lot of control over that. Yeah, if you haven't articulated it yet, try to articulate it. And it's not something that we want to let slip by.
Rabbi,
Yes.
My daughter for Father's Day last year got me a book, and it's to the effect of knowing your father, and it was basically questions about your life. And it took me, I don't know, Mary can know, probably a few months just to write these answers. But it's writing your epitaph. You know, it's like, oh, she's going to say this at my funeral, you know, type thing. So, I mean, it's really interesting if people really want to learn about themselves, really, in their childhood and their life, to get a book like that and to give it to their children. Not wait for their children to get you a book like that. It was just, I learned a lot about myself, actually.
Well,
What is
that's,
the book, Mike?
I don't know exactly what it was called. Maybe Mary remembers, but it was knowing your life, or knowing your father, or something
Oh,
like that.
really?
Yeah, it was just a wonderful experience, actually. And then sitting with her, going over it, was pretty emotional also.
So Mike, do you like who you discovered?
Mary doesn't remember it right now, she's saying. Doesn't remember the title.
I remember my father very, very well. And I only wish that people could think of me like I felt and feel about him. He was totally someone you could trust, always rely on, loyal, loving, compassionate. So many good qualities. Always took care of his family, took care of his mother his whole life. I have nothing bad to say about my dad.
It's,
All his brothers and sisters through college.
wow,
I mean, it doesn't end.
right.
It doesn't end. And he went to work from the time he was 10 because his father passed away. And so 1903, so
Wow.
yeah.
So when people think about the people in their lives that are stand out, and again, what's interesting, of course, is that some of these people would have said that their parents, but maybe in some cases, the people that they studied with, their teachers, their rabbis were like that to them. It's interesting to think what were the, how did people decide and how did they view their lives through the prism of those who came before? And look, I'm sure Rabbi Hillel's students said, we're not going to be Rabbi Hillel, right? But at the same time, some of them became known, and regardless, if it wasn't for Rabbi Hillel's students, we wouldn't have the stuff that he taught, right? Because if they had just said, well, we're not going to be Rabbi Hillel, but they had a job to teach this stuff that was taught to him and was taught to them, and they kept the chain going. So all of us have a role to play in keeping this chain going, right? So there are definitely things that stick out, and there's sometimes people who stick out, but whether or not we remember all of their names, they all have a role to play in it. And sometimes they're the unrecognized people, and there are people whose names we don't remember. But if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have gotten to this point, Think about, you go over as a kid, you're like, I can remember all the presidents. You go, you're 40, you don't remember all the presidents. You go, George Washington, and then there's Abraham Lincoln. And you just skipped over 15 presidents. That there's Monroe and Madison and Jackson. There's a bunch of people there. But, then you go, well, who's the next great president? You start thinking, oh, Teddy Roosevelt, whatever. You start going through the presidents and you go, oh man, there are only a few that kind of stick out and I can remember. I know that Chester Arthur was there, but I don't remember exactly when he was, right? So the fact is that there's people who stand out, and there are people that we remember, and there's people that are heroic and did some really important things. But the reality is if you don't have all of those other people, if you don't have a list and a transmission, if we didn't have a president, or if the country fell apart, that we wouldn't get to here. And so, maybe that's not the best example for the rabbis, but I always think to myself, when you look at traditions there and the chains and the families, however we got to where we are, if it wasn't for those people along the way, we wouldn't be here. So
This
again,
has really made me think, and I realize there have been poems that have had a big impact on me over the years. One was If by Rudyard Kipling. If
Yeah,
you can keep
great.
your head when all about you are
Right.
losing theirs and blaming it on you.
Yeah.
And the poem Invictus, I am the master of my soul, I am the captain of my fate. I mean, there are a lot of poems in my past that have strengthened me when I have felt weak or unsure of myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so whether it's poem or whether it's a song, or in some cases, again, lines from the Bible, or in this case,
Right.
lines from Pirke Avot that can stick with us. Look, as we were just discussing, as people were saying about how they're reflecting on this, the saying that sticks out in my mind, and why we do this, why we're doing this tonight, why I'm encouraging people to think about this, is the famous line that we don't know for sure he said it. According to Plato, he said it, but we don't know for sure, is the unexamined life is not worth living, which is what supposedly Socrates said. And Socrates got into a lot of trouble with the Greek authorities, but he said things like that, and the unexamined life. And I do think that, gosh, I mean, we're here. We don't know what happens necessarily in the next world, but we hope that there's a big banquet coming. But in this world, we have to think about why we're here and what we're learning and what we have to do in this world. And so this is all part of the Pirke Avot, if you will. And so, hundreds of years before, before Socrates even lived, you have lines from the Torah, right? The Psalms and things like that.
Yes.
And then you have Socrates, and then you have these rabbis who maybe they knew Socrates' words, because Socrates lived, about 350 or a little bit before these guys. Maybe he knew them. Maybe Rabbi Akiva knew what Socrates said. It's possible that Platonic philosophers were big in Egypt and were big in the area. There were Jewish philosophers like Philo who knew Greek philosophy. So it's possible. It's possible that some of the rabbis were influenced by them. But there were a lot of things that were different about Greek philosophy and the rabbinic sayings. Some of them are the same, but that's definitely one that I think if to some extent it kind of sums up what Pirke Avot is about, it's also about, thinking about what's important. What are the values? And again, how does it apply to us? Because in the end of the day, my job of giving people the exposure to Torah is to help us understand our lives, for us to see ourselves in the Torah. And so, if I would summarize what my job is and what I see myself as doing, is helping people see their lives through Torah. And so to let people be surrounded by the Torah, to swim, to live, to drink from the Torah, as using a water metaphor, that we're surrounded by it and float on it and enjoy it, and that we're sustained by it. So this is the environment that we're supposed to be in. And actually, to use Rabbi Akiva's words, when we're taken out of our water, when we're taken out of that, we die. And he said we're like fish out of water. When the rabbis said to Rabbi Akiva, "Hey, tone it down a little bit. The Romans are going to kill you." He said, "Look, if they kill me, they're killing me for doing what I have to do." if I come out of the water, it's like a fish that's been taken out by a net. If the Romans are going to do that to me, I'm going to die anyways. So he said, I'm going to be in my water. I'm going to swim in this stream. So that's what my goal is to help people swim and live in the waters of Torah. So that's maybe that's what I'll be known as, the guy who was the swimming coach for the Torah. So yes, Mary.
The wisdom of my grandmother, who never graduated from high school, was make a difference. And so that's sort of where my life has been, try to make a difference.
So Mary said, make a difference. Mary said, make it.
Mhm.
Well,
This for all of us.
well, thank you, Mary. Thank you,
So proud.
thank you, thank you. Well, I wish I had known your grandmother, because she definitely inspired you, and you inspire us, Mary. And one of the things, again, I always remind people of what Mary did with her life, which was provide comfort to people in their last days on this planet, which is a very hard thing to do, if not the hardest thing to do. And it's one of the holiest things to do, because holding somebody's hand and helping them exit this world is one of the highest mitzvahs, because it's the scariest time for people. And there's way too many people that don't have that, and it's very, very sad. I'm always sad when somebody didn't have that help and support. So thank you, Mary. So your grandmother would be very proud. You got to live the best version of that, be making a difference. So again, I honestly, I don't think there's anything harder than what Mary did. I mean, there are a
Can-
lot
can
of
I tell
things that
you-
nurses do. Well,
Can I
taking
tell
care
you a
of
story about my
Taking
beautiful
care of
wife?
Mike, taking care of Mike is also
Oh, it's tough. It's tough. But but
tremendous
on a
job.
serious note, I want to probably embarrass Mary a little bit, if I can get through this story. My dad loved Mary. My dad was actively passing away. And I said to him, Mary will be here in the morning. She was on her way from Arizona. She got in at midnight. We got a call at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to the hospital. She got there. We got there. She got my dad more comfortable than what the nurses were doing. And she passed away like 2 hours later, as you know, because you were there. That just shows you the compassion that Mary has, and what my dad had.
Yeah.
It
And
was
when you
just, it was an incredible experience.
When you think about how many people she did that for and how much it meant to
Yeah.
you.
When my sister was passing away, she told me if I had any questions to call her, and I did. And I mean, she told me what to expect, and what to look for. It was wonderful.
Yeah. That's pretty special. But again, Mike, the experience that you had, knowing how much it meant to you, you think about how many people she was able to help over the years, like in that same way. It is amazing. Yeah. That's pretty much, that's the express ticket to heaven. If whatever this next existence is, that's an express ticket punch to heaven, because that is one of the hardest things. I mean, it is.
Right to God Eden.
Yeah, right to Gan Eden. They don't even ask questions. They don't even ask questions. They go straight. No, she's going straight to the front of the line. But that is a great thing to think about. Helping people when they need it the most is tough. People say, like they say that to me, you have to go to so many funerals, and I just got called a week and a half ago by somebody who's not a member of the temple anymore, and I haven't seen in a long time. And they said, can you please come here? My dad's dying. And like, it was a Saturday night, and I had to go. I mean, I was able to, and I went out, and did it. And people say, like, even my family goes, how do you like, what, you just did it? I go, yeah. Like my daughters were like, you're going right now? I go, yeah, I have to. But for me, I also get to go to, I have a bris tomorrow that I get to go to. I don't have to do it, thankfully, but I get to be there. So I get to be there, and I have a bat mitzvah this weekend. I had a wedding last weekend. I get to do fun things too. I get to be at happy stuff. So it's not, I don't only have to be there, in the last moments for people, but Mary did that and was called on doing it. And again, I know that she felt blessed to do it with people, to hold people's hands, but it's not an easy thing to only be there at the end for people. So, a lot of people go, I get to be a neonatal nurse and I get to hold babies and stuff. Like, yeah, that's a great thing. Who wouldn't love to hold a baby? You don't have to take them home, right? You don't have to change the diaper. You get to just hold them, bring them out. It's hard work. I don't want to minimize it, but Mary definitely had the side that it's tough on people. It's tough. It's tough because you carry it with you, and you don't forget. You don't forget the stuff that.
It takes a very special person to do what Mary did.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Mary expected that this was going to turn into a Mary tribute, but it did, and she deserves it. But as we wrap up tonight, I promised people that we would show you what we're doing in the coming weeks. Now, what's interesting about this, folks, is that, hold it one second. So next week is Passover, and we are going to have class next Wednesday, sorry. So Passover starts
Monday
Monday
night.
night, right? So
Rabbi, what about Tuesday morning?
So we are having class on Tuesday. I scheduled it a while ago, and partly it's because the week after, the following Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm not here. So we are going to start next week's class, and then we are off next Wednesday night. The Wednesday after, the 1st of May. But I don't expect that we're going to be off any other times in May and on Wednesdays. And, look, Wednesday nights are a little bit easier to do, even if I'm traveling, because especially if I'm on the East Coast, it just means we start later. But then I'm starting at the same time that the Schulmans are jumping on. So it's not a problem. But when we get into this new text that I'm going to share with you, that we're going to start looking at, what's cool about what we're going to do is that a few years ago, I couldn't have even imagined doing this. And the reason that we're going to be able to be doing it is because of Sefaria. And I will tell you that this is a wonderful resource. This is a resource that goes across denominations. We've used it since COVID when we started doing these classes. It allowed us to not have to have a book in front of us. It saved us a lot of money because in the past we would have to buy books. It's just wonderful. And it is a nonprofit, by the way. If you want to support Sefaria and make a donation, I definitely would tell you so if anyone ever wants to donate, you can definitely support them. This is an organization or a group of people that are doing something really special. So I couldn't have done this a few years ago. And when we studied or even Pirke Avot before, which we did, we used a book and there are many translations of Pirke Avot. We happened to use one that was done by Jewish Publication Society, which does a lot of great books, but it was difficult. So that being said, when we've studied rabbinic texts before, and this was a rabbinic text, it was difficult because we had to get the right translations. We had to buy the books, and we have them. I mean, we have volumes of Talmud on the shelves that we used the last time, but they're $35 a piece. So it's costly. So what we're doing now is actually, so I looked at certain possibilities of what text we could look at. And I think people, first of all, I loved how engaged everyone was in Pirke Avot and how meaningful it was for people because they were, I think, look, if I had told people we're studying the Talmud or the Mishnah, if I had said we're studying the Mishnah, people would have been like, what are you talking about? And they'd be like, I can't study that. I can't wrap my head around the Talmud. And so it's a little scary. It's a little bit much for people. Well, there's a section of the Talmud, which is what we're going to be looking at. Well, actually, no, let me rephrase that. There's a way of studying the Talmud that we're going to be doing, which was never available before, but it is now. And I actually have a copy of the Ein Yaakov, which is what we're going to be looking at. And if I told people definitely 10 years ago that we're going to be studying the Ein Yaakov, people would be like, how are you going to do that? How long is it going to take? How are you going to do that? Is there even a version of this that you can buy? I don't know that there's even an English version of Ein Yaakov that's come out in the last several years. Definitely not that hasn't been done by an Orthodox group. This translation is based on Talmudic translations that aren't necessarily the newest ones, but they're good, and the commentary is all hyperlinked. So what is the Ein Yaakov? The Ein Yaakov is the Talmud, essentially, stripped out of the very esoteric and sometimes very tangential legal discussions that the Talmud has. So to some extent, and the Ein Yaakov was created many, many hundreds of years ago, centuries ago. The Ein Yaakov goes back literally 500 years. But the
16th
concept,
century.
correct. So Mike has already done a quick dive into it. So Mike, what does it say about the Ein Yaakov? What does it say on your page?
It's a compilation of the AGGADIC material in the Talmud.
Agadic
Yeah.
material, the Agadah.
Yeah, with commentaries. Its introduction contains an account of the history of the Talmudic censorship and the term Gemara.
Yeah.
Was compiled by Jacob ibn Habib,
Mm-hmm.
and after his death by his son, Rabbi Levi Habib.
Yep. So what I probably shouldn't be described this way, and nobody in the Orthodox world would ever describe it this way, is that it is the souped up version of the Talmud. It's the Talmud that has been stripped away of the boring parts. But it's not really fair to say that, because it's not boring. No part of the Talmud is boring. But
How large is this then?
Oh, it's large. But
Yeah.
what it does is it focuses on stories. Some of them we've already read. Some of them I've shared with you over the years. But what it does is it allows you to actually take in the story. And Agadah is the legend part, or it's the part that is the story part. And what's interesting about it is it's not really fair to call it Agadah as legend, but it's the part of the Talmud that is the part that people often quote, and it's the part where people say, this is an important teaching, or this is an important lesson that I've taken away from the Talmud. And so what it really is it's not the legal discussions, what we call the halakha, the law.
It's really saying it's folklore.
Well, it's a little bit more midrashic, but
Yeah.
that also isn't fair to say, because it's not just midrash. And we've studied midrash before, but remember, the midrash that we studied was actually from a book called The Legends of the Jews, which was compiled more recently in the last century by Louis Ginsburg as a collection of midrash. And it was done chronologically. This is not chronological. These are not just legends. These are discussions. I mean, you can look right here where we're going to begin, which is discussions and in some cases quotes from the rabbis. But there is in this and contained in this some of the most meaningful kinds of lessons and of interesting sayings that the rabbis had. So this is not just legend, but also kinds of words to live by, if you will, including, again, little things like why do people I'll show you. Well, I don't want to skip ahead because we're going to be reading this in the next few weeks, but some of kinds of the ideas that we had in Pirke Avot, but even more so, lessons for how we live. So I don't like to call it legend because it's not legend, but it is kind of the halakha taken away. One of the reasons why I think it's so important for us is because as non-Jews, have kind of like learned about Judaism through us or through what they've learned about Jews, and quite frankly for us as Jews who for the most part don't live in a halakhic system, I think that this way of reading the Talmud gives us much more of a practical takeaway from this. So hopefully you'll have a chance to say that you studied a lot of Talmud and quite a lot of it, but again, the parts that really have been given to us to inspire us and to learn from, and will take away a lot of interesting things that, again, are part of what we enjoyed about reading Pirke Avot. So this is kind of building off of Pirke Avot, and hopefully people will enjoy it. So if I described that we were reading Ein Yaakov, people would probably say, "What the heck are you talking about? What is this?" And that's what we're going to be. That's what we're going to be studying. So I hope people enjoy it. It's going to be keeping us busy for many, many, many moons. So don't ever have to worry about what we're going to study after. And I promise you, it'll all be in English. So that is what we'll be looking at. So we are going to have class next week, but not the week after. So next week will kind of be an overview. We'll start looking at some of this in depth. And then in the coming weeks, we'll have a chance, like I said, to study more of the Talmud. And again, the Talmud, you can see, is quite long, there's quite a lot of books that make up the Talmud, but we'll have a chance to, again, read through this. So again, thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for studying Pirke Avot with us. And we will see you this weekend, this Friday, if not before. We'll see you tomorrow night too, or we won't see you, but maybe we'll see you in line at Mendocino Farms, because unless you're living in Washington or Dallas area, the central Texas area, you can get a sandwich tomorrow at Mendocino Farms, and half of it goes back to the temple. So get a sandwich tomorrow at Mendocino Farms and share it
The
with your
money,
friends
not half the sandwich. The
on
money.
on social media.
Not half a sandwich.
All right. Okay.
Rabbi, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
It's so deep.
Thank you.
It's so good and so special. I thank you deeply.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you.
Good night.
And is this in Pesach? If we don't talk to you before, happy Passover. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Chavitza.